She thumps a cane and drinks champagne. She's formidable and judgmental, but we can guarantee that she's a quintessential lady D, but recognizes great potential. What would Danbury do?
Welcome to What Would Danbury Do? Your guide to Julia Quinn's Bridgerton series from A to V. This season, we're diving into Bridgerton on Netflix. After last episode's heartbreak, it's all about excitement and drama this week with punching, running, horseback riding, sexing and shooting, and we finally get the answer to the will they, won't they question of the season. We're halfway through and shit's about to get real.
Daphne does her best to move on from Simon and imagine a future with Prince Friedrich. Simon seeks distraction by coaching his friend in boxing and boxing a little himself. However, nothing works, and Daphne and Simon share their first kiss in the gardens of a ball where Anthony finds them and demands that Simon marry Daphne. Simon refuses, and they agree to duel. Daphne discovers that she and Simon were seen by Cressida Cowper and rushes to interrupt the duel and begs Simon to marry her. He agrees, but reveals that he can never have children. This episode features a very charming discussion about cheese, an encounter under the bleachers, the beginning of an investigation, and one hell of a piece of jewellery.
I'm Rudy.
I'm Kate.
And I'm Adele.
I said this to you guys earlier, but so much of my notes for this episode is just varying degrees of boo, and I hate this.
And Affair of Honour isn't one of the best episodes, in my opinion.
It's the episode where everything is going wrong.
I just feel like a great deal happens, but they kind of missed the emotional core.
So in the interest of staying on track, this episode opens with Daphne and Violet at court. Daphne is presented with a necklace by the prince and has a little daydream that actually it is Simon, and then she's sort of brought back into herself again.
So there are a few things in the necklace scene that I noticed. The first is I liked the touches of pineapples on the Queen's table because it reminded me of that scene in Sanditon about the importance of a pineapple and how it wasn't there to be eaten necessarily. It was there to be admired as this exotic fruit that was really a display of wealth more than anything else. And the Queen had 4 pineapples on her table. But did you notice that Daphne and her mother and the Queen and the Prince are all in blue?
Did not notice that.
No. Does that mean they're in concert?
Actually, we probably are supposed to see them as the natural choice. Who turns down a prince?
I mean, we're going to talk about this later in the episode, I'm sure. But I'm actually a little Team Friedrich.
Interesting.
Do we like this necklace?
No. I think it's supposed to be suffocating. If you look at the other neck pieces, they're lower. So you can, there's freedom around the neck. So it's quite probably deliberately constricting and quite heavy looking.
Yeah, I noticed as well. Lady Danbury's actually sits quite low. She doesn't have any restrictions on her life. She doesn't have anybody who is holding her to account. And she doesn't necessarily have to. She chooses to, but does not have to hold anybody else to account. Whereas Violet has her children that she still needs to wrangle. She still needs to have some level of respectability because of that. So hers it's low, but it's not it's not strangling her. Yeah. This necklace from the prince to Daphne, it sits quite high. It looks like a choker.
It's really quite heavy looking for what she has actually worn and the way she wears her hair. It's not actually the style of what she wears.
He's chosen something that doesn't suit her, doesn't fit her, and is strangling her. And she's forcing herself to wear it.
One of the things that I did just following the scene at court is we get a glimpse of Hyacinth actually being Hyacinth in a way that we haven't seen her yet. Her following Daphne up the stairs. And then when Daphne says, shouldn't you be with your governess? And Hyacinth is like, well, yes, but my governess has all the same questions that I do. I thought that was a really charming little, like tiny little charming scene where we get to sort of see the force of personality that we're going to see with Hyacinth later on as she grows up.
And so then we go to boxing.
Or as I like to call it, shirtless Simon scene. God, I love Alice Mondrick so much. And I particularly like that she's sort of playing the role of the audience here a little bit, because she speaks truth to power. She berates Simon for not recognizing that he has all of this power and privilege, and that's the only reason that he has time to mope around like he is right now, and that there are other people in the world and other people in his life who don't have that privilege and who will have actual real problems and real concerns outside of, you know, I've made a stupid vow to my father and now I'm too stubborn to just let it go.
So here is a question that has possibly been answered by the show already, and I just didn't pay a lot of attention. Where did Will and Simon meet? Like, how are they friends? I mean, don't get me wrong, because I do like the fact that he has black friends, because, like, there's not a lot of black people in this show that are talking to each other, and this is a rare exception. But, like...
And he's fully integrated in Will's life. Like when I watched it, I originally thought that he'd met because he decided to take up boxing and that's how he'd met Will. But I mean, he is so fully integrated in his life that his wife Alice feels 100% comfortable, like being very direct with him. Will feels super comfortable not, you know, pulling her up for rudeness or whatever in front of him. Like, it's very clear that the three of them are very comfortable with each other. So
Marina's storyline is getting real fucking bleak.
It's not even that she has these choices to make. None of them are good.
I think
like, it's bad, and fucking bad.
But also just like the way that she is literally being treated like an animal. Like, he asks her to smile so he can check her teeth. Like, he walks around her to, like, inspect her, like, physique. Like, it's everything about it is so cringe and it's so uncomfortable to watch. And I know you're meant to feel discomfort, but there is a part of me that is just like, I don't need this.
Lady Featherington tries to offer up that she has his accomplishment. He's like, fuck if I care. I just want to put her through her paces, which is even more degrading in terms of he doesn't care that she can talk or sing or carry a thought in her head. He just cares how she moves.
Yeah. And I think, you know, this has been depicted in historical romance for white heroines in the past, but when you lay the racial element on it as well, you cannot help but think of slave trades and slave auctions and see, it's just really grotesque.
Especially because we're not seeing, like, the white debutantes go through something like this. Like, even Nigel Bobrok, who was incredibly disrespectful about his intent to marry Daphne regardless of her feelings, like, he didn't translate that disrespect into this, you know, like, they managed to hold back there, and there is a part of me that is like, oh, so you do know that there's a line, you just have chosen to cross it with Marina.
Well, I think it's even more prominent because we're going to have the scene a little bit later that sets up the alternate history here in terms of the racial integration of society and how that came about and what that means going forward. So it does create it creates a lack of internal consistency, which is what bothers me the most about the colorblind casting that the show said that it used all the way through, because they're trying to create this society where everybody's equal and there's no longer any issues in terms of race discrepancy, but they're still pulling in notes from a violent and racialized history. So even that lack of internal consistency within the show says, actually, you know what? You cannot, in fact, just create a show where we pretend like we're in a post-racial society.
Maybe part of my reaction to all of this has to do with the fact that, like, we are recording post the release of Meghan and Harry being interviewed by Oprah. Like, all of, it just, not that I didn't already have issues with this series, but like, it's like it has exacerbated everything, which then means that, like, every time we have these sorts of these Marina scenes and then a tonal shift of like, oh, cute little cheese boy, I'm like, I love the cheese boy. I hate that Marina doesn't have a cheese boy of her own. I mean, she does, but he's at war.
I think the scene just underlines what we've seen over and over again in terms of the commentary that's been created around the casting choices in the series and the decision to make it a more inclusive society, that it's a pretty fairy tale, but we don't live in a fairy tale, and those choices cannot be made in a vacuum like that. That there are going to be aspects that are going to affect how viewers view it and affect how that story is told and affect how that story comes across. And even though I know that the writer's room is really inclusive, those things aren't going to land the way that I think that the show hoped that they would.
But I also know a lot of people won't see any of this stuff, which is also really alarming to me as well. So anyway, it's just a big hole you can dive into. And
part of the problem is that this is a scene that we've all seen before. Like, when it comes to representing Black people on screen, Black bodies in particular, this is a scene that we've all seen before. And yes, in this case, it's put into a different context where, you know, Marina is a reasonably privileged person living a reasonably privileged life, although she finds herself in quite a precarious situation. But this concept of white men looking over Black women as inferior to them, as animals next to their own personhood. This is a scene we've all seen before, and it was wholly unnecessary to see it again. Like, this is not the representation that the show is trying to say that they're doing. Like, they're trying to tell us that they're providing a representation where we get to see new depictions of power, new depictions of privilege, new ideas of history and how a society can look, except that this is not new at all. This is incredibly old and very tired and incredibly damaging.
Let's look, honestly,
we can move on. We can move on. This is going to be grim.
But also, it's going to keep coming back, and I think that there are other places to have this. Jesus Christ. Here's where my head's at. We've gone from a metaphorical slave marketplace into a real marketplace where Eloise wants to buy feathers.
I think be young and wealthy.
She doesn't want to buy feathers because she doesn't want to feel like a bird. And I just was like, do you know what, Eloise? Go fuck yourself. But that's fine. It's fine. I don't have rage issues about this right now.
I mean, I think this is a misstep from our little baby feminist, because she's obviously very passionate about women having choices, while also completely denigrating all of the choices of many of the women in her circle.
It's kind of fascinating because if I think back to the first episode of this series, and Kate, you were talking about how Daphne was kind of putting forth these feminist ideals of, can't you see that I'm trapped by like the expectations of my gender? All anyone sees me for is like a wife and a mother. Meanwhile, we've got Eloise, who is also railing against this idea. And the only real difference between her and Daphne is that she genuinely doesn't want to be a wife and a mother. And somehow they're not finding common ground with these two characters. Somehow they've ended up in opposition. And I keep wanting to be like, people are allowed to make choices that you don't actually want to make yourself. And that's kind of the point.
Well, and she doesn't realize that she's actually not. I mean, obviously there's a rift between her and Daphne, but she's causing a pretty deep rift between her and Penelope as well, because in many ways Penelope also wants what Daphne wants, although Penelope wants it with a very specific gentleman as opposed to the institution necessarily. And Eloise doesn't seem to recognize that they're not 100% in accord at the moment in terms of where their heads are at about what they want for their futures.
No, because she's too busy trying to figure out who Lady Whistledown is.
So we've gone from people being treated poorly and people not getting along to Anthony and Daphne actually getting along.
He still wants the best guy for Daphne, but he now recognizes that it has to be something she wants as well. So you see that actually multiple times throughout this episode. So there's some like growth.
So we're back in the boxing ring, and we've got the Prince's champion fighting the Duke's champion, because the show is entirely about subtlety on every level.
So subtle.
This is the scene also where I suddenly think that, oh, maybe actually, you know what? Team Friedrich.
So when you say that you're Team Friedrich, do you just mean that you like him, or do you mean that you like him best for Daphne? There's no wrong answer, except there is, but there is no wrong answer.
There is a wrong answer, and there's an answer that may get me kicked out of this podcast.
We're open to wrong opinions.
But look, particularly now, and honestly, realistically, I think Prince Friedrich may have been a better choice for her. A, he's higher rank and she'd be much more important, which is a consideration, even though it's not the only consideration. But B, he wants exactly the same things. He wants to live in England, so he's not going to take her away from her family. He's very pro having a family, and he also comes from a big family, so he understands the responsibilities that come with that and the expectations. He knows how to behave himself in public. He's always been very straightforward and very communicative with her, which bodes really well for if they ever have a disagreement. He's never insulted her or played with her feelings. He brings her expensive, if somewhat questionably tasted jewelry. So this discussion that romance readers have all the time about how they like reading about certain heroes, but they'd never choose them in real life. Prince Friedrich is the hero that you choose in real life.
Agreed. I'm going to admit right now that I'm also Team Friedrich. And I have been from the beginning.
This is the thing. Neither of you are wrong. This is the guy that you choose in real life. It just is if this is if this is the ship you are going to be boarding and you are going to set sail on, you are in for a disappointment. This isn't the book for you. This isn't the show.
Well, I think, okay, so obviously this discussion is held entirely in the context of the fact that we all know that we're watching a romance novel. So we know that Simon is going to come good in the end, and that everything is going to be okay, and that all emotional heartbreak is going to be behind them, and that this is actually part of their emotional narrative plot line to prove that when they do finally get together, that they have been through the worst that their relationship is going to throw at them, and that they can make it through anything else that life throws at them afterwards. But in this episode, the characters don't know that they're in a romance novel. So they have no idea that Simon is eventually going to actually step up and be a grown-up.
Okay. Oh my God. Last episode. Simon was propositioned by Sienna. She is what he says he wants on paper, and he doesn't choose her. And then here, now, Daphne is presented with someone who is perfectly what she wants on paper. What this is textual proof that they can survive as a couple because they've been tested by like outside influences and they have passed those tests. Boom, done. All right, end of episode.
Well, speaking of couples who are being tested, the very next scene, we have Benedict and Henry. How can this not be a setup for perfect romance? I mean, Benedict stammers and he blushes and he like does this cute little look down and then look up again thing. Like, this is 100% flirting. And absolutely come by my studio sometime is 100% Regency speak for Netflix and chill. Benedict doesn't know that he's in this story, but Henry 100% knows that he's in this story. In the meantime, the prince has proposed.
What I love about that scene is Anthony comes in and he talks about the stuff that was important with the previous attempt to marry her off, which is, I've checked into them, they're okay, but this doesn't mean anything if you're not on board like Daph. So someone's had some learning.
Also, if you are keeping track of your Francesca watch, we have one mention of her in this scene. Eloise lies and says that she is writing to Francesca to tell her how annoying Hyacinth is being, or something to that effect.
Officious.
I mean, the thing is, if the idea of being proposed to makes you feel like you're drowning, it's a pretty good sign that it's not the guy for you.
Well, and I think that's the thing, like, because we have this scene then between Violet and Daphne where Daphne admits that everything was a lie and that she was pretending, where she's telling it to her mother and very obviously also trying to convince herself at the same time. And Violet sees through everything. Like, she's surprised that they'd come up with this ruse, but also is unsurprised that Daphne developed real feelings. And I think this goes back to what you were just saying, Rudy, about how Daphne realizes sort of on a fundamental level that the prince isn't right, because she says, when her mom asks her about her necklace, she says, I should like it very much.
It's such a British pun. I should like it very much. As in, I do like it a lot. But it's also very definitely, it's there to let us know she should like it, but she doesn't. So I did want to slightly step back and say the one thing that I do really hate about that scene of Daphne telling Violet that it's all been a lie and that they were in a fake relationship, they made it up. It was like, I said this before and I will maintain, the whole point of a fake relationship trope is that they are in this together. They are the only two people who understand and who know the truth until it's no longer a lie. That's, for me at least, that is the appeal of it. It's making them a team. And suddenly she's invited her mother into the team. And I'm a bit like, mate, you don't need your mum.
Rudy, he told her they're not friends anymore. He broke the contract first.
He broke up the team and now she feels all alone, so she's desperate for another team member.
I want to say that in bringing her mother into this team, she's trying to keep the team alive. It's like she should just abandon it properly.
Okay, so our next scene, we have Simon in the midst of packing up all of his belongings, presumably to go back into storage, and Lady Danbury shows up to drop some deep truths.
So it turns out that the reason that there are black and brown people in the peerage is because of love. Yep. It's fucking great.
Did we need this?
We didn't need it like this. We didn't need this explanation. And so for the last couple of episodes, we've had kind of different things where we've had to kind of put them on the table. When we think about Lady Danbury's incredible speech to little baby Simon, and when I was a girl, like that whole thing, and she's talking that bit where she's talking about when she was a girl and how afraid she was and how timid she was, and when she, you know, when she finally hit a point where she's in society and she is in these positions of power, or she's in these powerful rooms, not necessarily a position of power, and she decided that the only way to survive was to make herself frightening. And I keep thinking about the age difference between her and Queen Charlotte. Lady Danbury did not grow up in this race-blind society. Like she, you know, like she came to it as an adult woman at the earliest. So the internal consistency of this world is that a king married a biracial woman, and then at some point they decreed that they were going to create titles that would allow other black and brown folk to have titles and money and land. So like you kind of sit here and you go, so who lost out and who held on to the resentment of losing out? It had to have come from somewhere.
Is a family line dies out and there's no one to inherit it, so there's just a vacant seat. But the likelihood of that is probably quite slim. So yes, families either
they had their power decreased, or they had their like.
It's just white privilege and the fear that white people have of like they'll have to give up all this stuff. Yeah, it's just awful, and it also plays really bad. Like. Two royals, one white, one biracial, hoping that love saves everything.
Yeah, there's other levels in that too, because Lady Danbury says at one point that there was two separate societies divided by color, which divides the world into white and not white, which is obviously the way that white supremacist and racism works. But it also disallows the idea of different experiences of different cultures and heritages as well, all underneath this expanse of color or the expanse of not white. And that's something that we see in the casting as well. We certainly see a number of African diaspora actors and characters, but we don't see the same representation of Asian actors and actresses. And
the ridiculousness of having a world that isn't racist but is sexist and classist. Like,
yeah, true.
How? These things all, and also, like, probably, although we've not really seen it because there are not really any disabled characters that we've seen, but it's probably ableist too. We know that it's homophobic. We know that, like, we can guess that it's homophobic. The way that we know all of these systems of oppression, like, weave in and out of each other in order to kind of maintain the status quo. To take one out and say that one thing is now going to work perfectly.
Well, and that it was solved by love.
And not even like widespread love, like just one couple that are at that are at the top of society, like they rank the highest, which also kind of comes into, like, we've talked about it a little bit. Queen Charlotte knows how precarious her situation is. Everything about this is just so fucking irritating.
So much of this show, so much of it from the color palette to the music to the art aesthetic of it all is set up to be this fantasy frothy fairy tale, right? And I feel like this was just part of that overarching fairy tale aesthetic. Like, it's meant to be a fantasy. Everything is going to turn out all well at the end. They wanted to make room in the world for a more inclusive and just cast. So they just said, okay, well, we'll just make it part of the fairy tale. And what's more fairy tale-esque than having a love story make everything better? And I can see sort of the reasoning behind that and the way that that thought process may have gone. I just think that they were too caught up in the aesthetics of their world that they were creating, that they didn't think about the very real world audience that was going to be engaging with the text.
I think this is also an element, a problem, a something of the romance genre at large. And I keep kind of coming back to Rachel Ann Matisse, who has written about this idea of compliance versus liberation narratives. The idea that characters are working to either liberate themselves from society's sort of strictures or are working towards conforming to those strictures. As a source material, The Duke and I is conforming. And that's probably why, even while they try and make this world work differently, it is kind of doomed to fail.
God, I love that theory from Racheline about that. And I think you hit the nail right on the head about why we are all so uncomfortable about this narrative. It's because it's attempting to normalize a white, wealthy, heterosexual experience as the ideal experience for everybody, and normalizing bringing Black characters into that white, wealthy, heterosexual experience in lieu of creating a new experience and a new way forward that actually addresses systemic inequality and creates a new way forward that works for everybody, that doesn't continue to center that white experience.
I guess I'm coming back to this show, looking at it and being like, what if they had decided to not make proximity to whiteness the goal? Like, what does that show look like? And the answer is very different to how it turned out. But this is the show we're watching, so you know, it's
But that being said, after everything that Ruby's just said, I believe, and you can correct me, that you're enjoying this series way more than I am.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, this episode was probably like the hardest.
I mean, the way we're talking about it is indicative of why we didn't enjoy it, right?
Mm. This
is a hard episode to talk with like joy.
I think one of the differences between your lack of enjoyment and my actual enjoyment is that I am happy to buy into the idea of Simon as a romantic interest.
True.
Like, and I know that you're not, and I know that you don't think that they have chemistry.
I don't even think they have chemistry.
I know. You said that one time and I cut it out and I was like, fuck that.
But like, I mean, art is subjective, right? So I can have my opinion and it be wrong to other people, and I can have my opinion and be right.
I'm so glad that you said that art is subjective, because that just reminded me of the one thing about this disheartening scene that I was like, oh, yay. Simon got the painting back with quite a lot of effort. Like, it was actually quite difficult, not for him because he is a duke and he has staff, but his staff.
Poor Butler Jeffries was like, I went to a lot of trouble, dude. Like, don't change your mind now.
Don't turn around and say you don't want this fucking thing.
Bitch. Yeah. Simon is really into Daphne, and we know that. It's another bit of evidence towards it that, you know, it shows that he can turn that corner when he gets his head out of his ass.
It symbolizes a lot of things, but I think one of the things that it symbolizes is because it's a painting of a dawn. This is a new beginnings. Like,
I see what you're doing there with your deep textual readings.
I mean, it's like you said earlier, Adele. Like, they're not subtle.
We also get the tiny little scene where cheese becomes foreplay.
Adele, I have a question for you because you have named all of the other balls so far. What's this ball?
Yes.
What do you call it?
The board harpist ball.
Okay.
I couldn't keep my eyes off of him. He was so beautiful and I loved his outfit, and he looked at the crowd with such disdain, except for when Sienna was singing, and God, did she look beautiful. And he had a slight smile on his face when he was playing behind her. But I couldn't look away from the board harpist.
I haven't noticed him.
Can we talk about how Sienna was just a vision? Like, I don't actually blame Anthony. Holy heck.
But first we have to go back to Benedict and Henry. So Benedict shows up at Henry's door, and Henry is there, and he's all rumpled and disheveled, and he's got like a brandy or something in his hand. And he opens the door and he's like, hey, hi, you came. Delighted. And Benedict is all like, I'm having feelings and I don't understand what's going on here, but definitely excited to be here.
Maybe because of art, but probably not.
I mean, I think he's probably telling himself it's because of art, but it's 100% not because of art. So if we have Eloise being our baby feminist all the way through this show, I think this is when we start to be introduced to baby classicism and socialism as well, to bring in those different aspects to the conversation.
Yeah, so Eloise, in her quest to find out who is Lady Whistledown, goes through the housekeeper's room, finds that she has kept a bunch of different copies of Lady Whistledown's column. And apparently that is enough to convince her that, like what kind of evidence is that?
The sheer entitlement of doing that in going in a private space of someone who doesn't have as much power in your household too, it's just bullshit.
Eloise never apologizes. And she 100% owes their housekeeper the biggest apology.
But I do love how the housekeeper hands it to her.
Oh, yeah.
Whilst mocking her, making her feel small. It's great.
Eloise's baby feminism definitely is not intersectional.
Also, she's not. But it sort of continues. She gets given these ideas of who Whistledown can be, but she never gives credit to the people who give her those ideas. She claims them as her own knowledge.
I like how they're doing these sort of cutscenes. It creates a sense of tension and unsettlingness. Unsettlement. Nobody is settled. Whereas all the other balls had long extended ball sequences. They had the beautiful dancing where everybody was in step with each other. And we had these lovely long scenes. And this one, it's ball, not ball, ball. Everybody is unsettled, and it's very clear in the way that they've done the editing of this scene.
This episode, the vast majority of it is gets ready for the ball, the night of the ball, the morning after the ball. A good 3/4 of it is probably the span of 12 hours.
So we get some Penelope here. We went back to, at the very beginning of the episode, we all said that this wasn't an episode that we particularly enjoyed. And I think it's because it's an unsettling episode and it has a lot of sharp edges to it. And I think we start to see Penelope being sharp as well as she watches her, her dearest wishes fall apart. The person that she thought she had power over suddenly having power over the man that Penelope loves, and that shift in the hierarchy is changing a little bit. She makes quite a sharp barb about their hostess's baby and the hostess's footman, which I also thought was really interesting because in the previous episode, Penelope doesn't know how babies are made, but she knows enough to know that babies can be made with footmen.
What do you guys think it says about Colin that the first real attention he pays to Penelope is that she's been snarky?
Yeah, because he looks at her for like a good second or two.
Maybe it's because, Kate, you pointed out that potentially one of the appeals of Marina to Penelope is that she has a level of control over her. Is that possibly like when Penelope has been a bit sharp about somebody and has been given positive reinforcement attention from a boy, and a boy that she likes, like, is this her learning that that's how you get more of what you want?
Interesting. All I thought was, Colin noticed her because Colin is perpetually bored. And he wasn't bored for a second there. And he'd never looked at Penelope before as somebody who could be entertaining.
Provoking, yeah.
Yeah. So it was sort of like the first step of him noticing more about her than Eloise's friend.
Can I bring up another Cressida point?
Probably.
Why are they continuing to try and popularize this opinion that she's not attractive? Is anyone looking at her? Because I know that a bad personality can make someone less attractive, but she's not a troll.
I think it's also a less interesting choice to have her be... Oh no, actually, maybe it is more interesting to have this like popular girl who's, quote, unattractive, regardless of whether we actually think that.
I mean, I think about, there was a series called Awkward a few years ago, and the villain was the fat cheerleader, basically. And she was, I think,
Sadie.
Rudy, you're making me think of this because you mentioned it a few days ago. Like, she was fucking brilliant.
I have
Sadie.
a special place in my heart for Sadie. Thank you.
Brilliant. Anyway, yeah. I've taken us into a hole. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So Prince Friedrich proposes to Daphne in the middle of the ball, which, I mean, it's like doing it at a football game on the fucking big screen or something. And Daphne, catching the sight of Simon repeatedly in her eye, begins to, I guess, hyperventilate and flees the room.
It's 100% hyperventilating because she's wearing the necklace and the necklace is too tight. And then she rips it off in the garden, and then we never see that necklace again.
I thought you were leaving London.
I was. I am. I came to say goodbye.
To whom?
To you.
Your goodbye is wholly unnecessary. We are not friends. We never were friends, as you made abundantly clear.
And I'm sorry for that.
Please do not apologize. I shall not be led once more by you from this direction to that. You are my friend, you are not my friend, you are a rake, you are not a rake, you are sorry.
I am sorry.
That is very well. But you should know that your apology has absolutely no effect on my life, nor does your leaving London. I am marrying the prince. I shall be very happy indeed.
Will you be happy?
Why would I not be? Prince Friedrich is kind and adoring, and he knows what he wants. He's a good man, and he will make a wonderful father.
And so you truly believe him the best man for you?
How dare you question my choices? They They are my choices to make, not yours. I do not question your choice to rake across the continent forlorn and alone. I do not have to explain myself to you. I do not owe you anything. He is perfect for me. I am going to be a princess. Are you going to say anything? Well, then leave. Ugh. Very well.
Normally I love these kinds of scenes, but there was something about it that didn't quite hit.
I don't think he was giving her anything, and maybe that was I think that was a deliberate choice, actually. But it meant she had nothing to play off of. So there's kind of like a void in the scene, and it's just weird. Like, I watched that scene a few times because I'm like, why don't I like this? And I don't love going into the gardens either. I think it was just to get them into the gardens. There wasn't like a emotional drive for that other than she was trying to get away from him because he kept, luring her in or whatever. But yeah, and also I don't know how the fuck Anthony found them.
I mean, I think partly it's because by necessity they're starting like further apart. But I think for me the thing about this first kiss is that
She knows what she's doing?
No, like I don't think she does. And I don't know what they're doing.
Well, this is okay. Remember when we were talking about the masturbation scene with Daphne and you said something off the cuff that was like, all sex in Bridgerton happens real fast?
Yes.
Like, that's what happened in this scene. They go from like the very first kiss to like, he's got one hand on her ass and one hand on her boob in like 5 seconds. Like, they're not even, they kiss. He kisses her, he apologizes. She kisses him back, and he like immediately disengages and is like giving her a hickey on her neck with her, with his hands all over her. And there's no natural progression of making out. There is
it's straight to the sex.
Hard kiss, surprised kiss, full on
hand up her
territory.
Dress. Like,
yeah,
I think that's the thing. Like, I look at it and I'm like, yeah, you've gone from 0 to 100 with this kiss. Also, like, it looks like a really uncomfortable pose. Like, the way that she's
it's not a well staged kiss.
It's really awful to look at.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted proper kissing, like actual kissing, particularly because it's Daphne's first time. Like,
I wanted seduction.
Yes, exactly. They went from, as you said, 0 to 100, but not like 0 to 100 in a hot way. Like, it's like they were like, okay, well, we need to make this raunchy right off the bat. What's the raunchiest thing we can do? And then filmed that instead of, and I think they really missed a trick. Like, it could have been incredibly sexy and incredibly sensual if they'd stuck to just kissing.
It's almost like it was written by someone who didn't recognize the fact that someone taking off your glove could actually be a beautifully romantic and sensual moment. Meanwhile, the art boys have actual chemistry.
See, and Henry's got it. He drops another line. He's like, come back anytime for practice or conversation.
He also is basically saying, you don't have to go now. You're welcome to stay the night. And Benedict, bless his heart, he's missed it. So he does go home. But he very definitely got hit on in that moment. And I didn't miss it.
I 100% did not miss it either.
Whereas I felt slightly excited by the cheese foreplay. Like, a guy could totally romance me talking about Stilton cheese. Like, come on. Mr. Finch got game.
Well, it's good that you talked about Mr. Finch, because our next scene takes us to the Featheringtons, where Lady Featherington is on a scavenger hunt, and poor Penelope is having her heart broken. Is it just me, or is Penelope wearing a corset under her nightgown?
I thought the same thing. Why?
But she's physically and emotionally uncomfortable in this scene, watching someone that she loves fall in love with someone else, which is really hard.
Based on how Marina has spoken about George, Colin and George seem like very similar.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, like
Good call.
like it makes a lot of sense that she's drawn to him even if she's not in love with him yet.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful, Roots.
Mm.
Like, she's trying to make the best of a fucking shit situation. Like,
So she's in her excitement is breaking Penelope's heart, and hurt people. So Penelope goes and breaks Eloise's heart, and they break up.
here's my question.
Mm.
Are Simon and Anthony actually friends? Because they don't really act like it at all.
They're man friends. They don't know how to be proper friends to each other.
Bridgerton?
Mm.
So you know how last time Anthony was going to fight a duel, I kept being like, I just don't believe in this threat. Once again, I don't believe in this fucking threat. There is a prince that has already signaled his intent to propose to her, and he, like, all they've done is kiss and have a bit of a grope, and like he was the only one to catch them. So I'm just like, what if you guys all just play it cool and let the prince propose to her and then have a speedy wedding? Whomst would even be able to say shit to them?
Well, I guess Cressida is the wild card there, right?
The prince would 100% be able to break off the engagement because she'd no longer be suitable. And then not only would she be the person who was like being groped in the garden, but she'd also be the person that the prince dumped unceremoniously.
Hear me out. Number one, you can always, like, if someone comes to you and is like, oh, I saw you doing something a bit sneaky, you can be like, mate, I'm gonna be a princess. Like, maybe you could be an ally rather than an enemy. And the other thing is, Cressida just looks like sour grapes.
Hold that thought, because we're doing a special episode on honor and also duels, and we will 100% be talking about this situation and the options that Daphne might have.
Okay.
All right, so we go to Will's house now, where Will is being so practical and so steady, and just, my question is drinking a really good idea before a duel? Like,
No, hard
do
no.
you want to be hungover and holding a firearm? I feel like this is a not bright.
This is the thing. Like, both in the book and in this, he is committed to just letting Anthony shoot him. Like, he's not going to do anything to stop it. He's not going to, and he's not going to fire back. He's just going, like, he understands that he has compromised Daphne, and he will not marry her for that. And so he's just gonna, like, to his mind, why not be drunk?
All right, so we cut from Simon and Will drinking to Anthony drinking. But Anthony's not only drinking, he's also, like, checking his watch. And then the thing I like about everything that how Anthony is portrayed is that it's like he does everything at a run. He doesn't do a single thing at a normal pace. Every decision he makes, every time he moves, he's just bolting everywhere.
It's super reactive. It is.
Yeah.
No, but can I talk about that scene? He is, and then it's so on the nose. It's not subtle again. He's in the shadow of his father, who is actively facing him, where he is sitting on the seat. But even better, above Anthony. So his dad is over the fireplace, but over Anthony, and this means they changed out the picture from previous episodes, which is why I'm talking about the art. It's a white horse.
Oh.
So there are two people who ride white horses to the duel. There is Benedict, and let's be frank, not him. There's also Daphne in her little Lord of the Rings ride. So, yeah, it's to like, I guess, foretell that Daphne is going to save her own skin.
I mean, I think also that it's trying to position Anthony as a white knight. Like he's trying desperately to be her white knight.
Well, Sienna actually delivers the title of the episode, which he says, An Affair of Honor. And then they end up sleeping together. Now, do we think that Sienna sleeps with Anthony because of his proposal to her that they run away together, or because she thinks he's going to die in the morning?
I think it's to say
Because
goodbye.
He's going to die in the morning.
To say goodbye?
Yeah.
Her face is distraught. Like, it's not...
I don't know that she necessarily believes that he will die. I think this is goodbye sex. But also all I kept thinking as this scene started was like, shut the door.
True.
So now we get to the Lord Featherington study when Lady Featherington has figured out what is going on, realizes that Lord Featherington has no honor because he has failed completely in his duties as a husband and a father, because not only has he gambled away the family's money, he has also gambled away his daughter's dowries, thus making them 100% unlikely to get married. First of all, she says, what are you going to do about it? Like, let's focus on the situation and how we're going to get ourselves out of it. And then he starts crying. So clearly he's going to be completely incapable of managing. It's very clear that the power dynamic has shifted dramatically in this situation. Which, I mean, can we just take a minute to cast aspersions on Mr. Finch for all of his cheese-related foreplay, for not marrying Philippa even without a dowry, because that's very practical, but it's not terribly romance novel-esque.
Yeah, I was disappointed in him.
But we don't technically know what was whispered to him.
Oh, yeah, that's true, actually. Lord Featherington could have said something
And
gross.
he does lie. He lies a lot.
So then we're back in the Bridgerton household. Daphne realizes that someone did see them, that someone being Cressida. The shift from having her do this because it's true versus doing this because she wants to marry him and she wants him to live is interesting. I think it weakens it, but I also know that we disagreed about book Daphne's behavior and intention in this moment.
I mean, it's just the start of making bigger changes to Daphne's motivations going forward, really.
Yeah, I mean, so they are about to duel before Daphne gallops up on her white steed and magnificent cloak.
Right into the middle of the fucking duel. Like, what the
CIG.
fuck?
They had these weird inserts of Colin and Daphne with a clear green screen that were completely unnecessary. But yes, she rides right into the path of a bullet. But then we get the conversation again of like, basically, I don't want to marry you.
Oh, no, it's not even I don't want to marry you. It's, no, I respect you too much to marry you.
I've read he's just not that into you. And
and she basically has to drop the Cressida Saurus, I'm ruined, you have to save me, as the carrot. Even then, he's like, can't have children.
This is what I mean. Like, what does it do to the narrative to have her reputation truly be on the line versus it being a lie?
He is Antony made over in this scene, whereas Antony's had some personal growth. Simon is at least 3 steps behind him in terms of he's got all these feelings and he doesn't know how to deal with them, so he wears them on the outside and just lets them splash over whoever gets into his vicinity, and he doesn't care who he hurts as long as he's able to do what he thinks is the right thing to do.
But she kind of just makes the decision for him. She decides and declares that to her 3 brothers and the doctor and Will.
Yeah. Honestly, in my extensive notes for this episode, for this whole scene, the only thing I wrote down is ugh, men.
Now it's time for
What Would Danbury Do?
In this section, we imagine that a character from another favorite book pens a desperate letter to the lady who tells it like it is, Lady Danbury. This week's letter comes from Lainey from Lucy Parker's Act Like It.
Dear Lady Danbury, my ex has unceremoniously dumped me through the pages of a gossip rag, but still plays my onstage love interest. The higher-ups want to ride this wave of public sympathy and have me in a fake relationship with the biggest knob in West End, Richard Troy. If I accept, my charity gets a boost of funds, but I may not be able to resist throttling the villain of the play and my life. What would Danbury do?
It sounds like a character who has sent us like a whispered voicemail from backstage.
Can I just say that I love this book a lot.
I guess the upside is, 1, funds go to a worthy cause, and 2, sometimes audiences can't distinguish between hate chemistry and heat chemistry.
Well, and you're both actors. Like, it's clear that it has to happen for the reasons. So consider it a performance. Just use it as acting practice.
I feel like Lady Danbury would be able to see the kind of possibility for power and an influence in this.
On a professional level, working alongside someone who is equally or if not better at your profession, that will raise your game. So it has professional growth aspects to it as well.
Thank you to @GlassEffigy for sending us that recording. And also thank you to our mutual friend Maria, who, when I asked if your Twitter handle was pronounced as Glass Effigy, responded that she always calls you Glass Figgy and didn't realise there was an E in there. So shout out to helpful friends as well.
If you too feel like you have a character in desperate need of some no-nonsense straight talk, feel free to audio record your letter and email it to us at bridgertonpod@gmail.com.
That's all for this episode of What Would Danbury Do? We'll be back in a fortnight to discuss episode 5, The Duke and I. If you haven't followed our new Instagram account, you can do so at www.ddpod. You can still find us on Twitter at BridgertonPod, send us an email at bridgertonpod@gmail.com, or join the conversation at #WWDDpod. You can also leave us a rating or review on your favourite podcast platform. It's guaranteed to make you at least 15% more attractive. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded land of the Gadigal, Wurundjeri and Boorong people and edited by audio producer, oh my God, I got it right and I stopped. All right. And edited by audio producer Rudy Bremer on Gadigal country. Thanks for listening and remember WWDD. What Would Danbury Do is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you love at frolic.media/podcasts.